tariffs creating hidden risks for Canadian companies today?
Well, there's certainly a lot of risks, especially in this market that we're in at the moment, where tariffs are up one day, down the next, and maybe up the third day. There's no definite trend in which way the tariffs are going. I mean, we've just seen China go from 20% tariffs to 40% tariffs to 80% tariffs to 145% tariffs. And now today they're all of a sudden down to 30% tariffs and look as if they might drop even further from that. So you think of it as, what are you going to do as an importer? Do you bring in stock even now? Or do you wait and see how this tariff war is going to play out? Because people who brought stock in this week, the last week, have paid 145% tariffs, are now going to be sitting in a position where they're going to be unable to offload that stock because new stock is going to come in priced at only 30% tariff, 100% less. So there's no ways that people are going to move that, which creates all sorts of fun as far as fraud goes. We've also seen now that there's been a move with the UK to go to a trade-free zone again. And if that does happen, then what will happen is all of a sudden the UK will be starting to produce a lot of goods that it never produced beforehand, because what people will do is import them into the UK at 0% tariff, relabel them, and send them out at 0% tariff to America. So this is how tariffs just don't work.
Are there any real life cases of fraud involving this that you can think of that have happened to date?
There are hundreds of them. If you have a look at fraud as far as identity of country and things like that, this has been going on as soon as you raise tariffs on one country which are higher than another, that country will find a way of relabeling its product and sending it out through the second country. It happens all the time.
And are Canadian businesses prepared for the compliance risks that come with international trade?
I think we are to a large extent. But again, with the market being so volatile, it's very difficult. If you're a producer in Canada of car parts, what is going to happen to the price of those car parts over the next 6 months? If you have to import part of let's say you're producing an engine here, and let's say 50% of the components come from the United States. When they come over the border, are they subject to 25% tariff? When you sell them, are they going to be subject to a further 25% tariff? And if that tariff suddenly goes away tomorrow, what's actually going to happen to the cost of your product? Are you going to have all of the stock sitting there, which is, overpriced? So it really is a challenge for companies as to what to do during this very, very uncertain time.
What red flags should Canadian CFOs or legal teams be watching for in their procurement and custom processes?
Well, when you're importing from a country, it's important that you do declare where the product has actually come from. So if you know that the product is coming from China and you declare that it's actually come from the UK, you're knowingly committing fraud. And that could result in some fairly hefty fines. So it's really important that the legal teams and CEOs make sure that they know where their product is being sourced from and that they're not complicit in breaking these type of trade laws. Otherwise, things could get fairly hairy as far as fines and penalties go.
That's really interesting. How do you feel that the Trump era tariffs have reshaped the fraud landscape for Canadian exporters?
Well, I think it's an ongoing thing. Donald unfortunately, is the one thing he is consistent about has been inconsistent. If there's no consistency whatsoever to any of his policies. And so, just as with his first term when he put 25% on steel and aluminium, so he's done it again this time round. This time he's gone further and put cars in. The first time round, the tariffs lasted for about 4 or 5 months. So it will be interesting to see how long they last for this time round.
So I've got a pretty interesting question. What is the difference between strategic tariff navigation and outright fraud? Where is the line? Is there a line?
The line in the sand. So strategic would be buying from a country. If there's two countries where you can buy the same type of product from, and one has a lower tariff than the other, then you buy from that country. Fraud is where you knowingly buying from a country that's producing the product at a higher tariff, and you're moving it through an intermediary in order to bypass the tariff. We see it all the time happening. We see it with sanctions. If Russia's trying to export something, at the moment there's so many restrictions on them. So how do they go about it? Well, they produce it, sell it to one of their friendly countries, and then that friendly country relabels it and on-sells it.
So, do you feel that the Canadian authorities are keeping up with the evolving fraud tactics linked to global trade?
Again, it's a difficult one to keep up when things are so fluid. We've always lived in a world where things take a really long time. And all of a sudden, with Donald coming in, that has changed the landscape completely. And we move daily between crisis to crisis. So it just depends on which side of the bed he got out of this morning as to what's going to happen in the world today. And that's really hard for any government to be beside. I mean, we listened to America when they wanted 100% tariff on Chinese cars because it was seen as being a strategic tariff to build the North American electric car industry. And people were worried that the tariffs, that the Chinese were producing a better car, cheaper, that they could sell quite easily here at a much lower price. So strategic tariffs like that, yes, they do work, but only for a short period of time. And sooner or later, what you're going to find is you're going to find loopholes in that being developed that they can sell their product into the US market, maybe under a different brand coming from a different country.
Sure. So, I mean, if you're a business leader in Canada, how do you audit your supply chain for fraud without grinding operations to a halt?
I think the main thing is to keep your finger on the pulse and to, if you've been buying product from a supplier where there is high tariffs, or you know there are going to be high tariffs on it and you're now importing through another country, just make sure that you aren't crossing the line and you aren't aiding and abetting fraud. Canada, fortunately, we don't have the high tariffs apart from with the States. But, you know, even looking at tariffs on cheese and dairy and stuff like that, what it does, these tariffs create opportunities for people to have a look and see how they can how they can game the system in order to get product in here at a lower tariff rather than at a higher tariff.
Is there any way that you can actually play this game legally to try and figure out how to keep your business afloat. This essentially could be the end of a business. If something's too expensive to import and there's no point in importing, that's the end of your business. What do you, Dave, from Forensic Restitution, suggest? Is there any way that you can help?
It's a difficult question. I mean, tariffs have never been a good idea for small businesses, especially those who do a lot of importing. And what it will result in is mass job layoffs in America. We've already seen mass job layoffs at the ports. We're seeing small businesses starting to close already. And we're only a month into these tariffs, not even. And so you can imagine that over the next 6 months, year, if these tariffs continue, how many businesses will fail. And when businesses fail, it always creates the risk that people will start trying to do things illegally.
This is one thing that I've learned from you is the fraud triangle. And one part of the fraud triangle is about needing to commit fraud because it's necessary. Maybe you could go into that in a bit detail when people are desperate and they make the wrong choices, essentially.
Well, I mean, there's two types of fraud. There's a fraud which is for need and a fraud which is for greed. For greed is fairly obvious. It's where you're doing something, you see a loophole in the system, you know it's wrong, but you exploit that system anyway. Think of Bernie Madoff. He knew that he was taking money in and he was just paying it out in dividends. There was no actual business that was running. And he didn't really care. He was living the high lifestyle, away he goes. Then there's the one just below that where it's a fraud for need. And often what we've seen is you have a daughter who has a medical emergency and it's not covered by your medical aid or by OHIP. And you now need to send your daughter down to the States for an operation which is going to cost, let's say, $100,000. There's not too many of us who can throw $100,000 together in a short period of time. And so what happens? You start looking for ways that you can make that money. And that would be a fraud for need rather than for greed. You figure out a way that you can get money out of your company to save your daughter. You've got all the justification in the world to do it. Your rationalization is that you need to get the money in order to pay for the op. And the only thing which is stopping you is opportunity. And if you find that opportunity, if you see that opportunity, you'll take it.
Thanks, Dave. Today's session was on fraud and tariffs. See you same time next week.